What's going on, guys? So today we're continuing maintenance on the Forester XT, and we're going to be taking care of something that's pretty high up on that list. So the Forester XT runs and drives fine. However, once you start driving and you start getting into higher speeds, you start getting this annoying humming, whining noise coming from the transmission area, and it gets louder when you downshift or when you're slowing down in gear. So I suspect that it is either the center diff or one of the bearings that's inside of that area. So I went ahead and ordered a brand new center differential and the bearing that sits around the center diff, which is usually the part that fails. Now, hopefully, when I go ahead and not drop the transmission, but when I go ahead and remove the center diff, hopefully it's either the center diff or that bearing that's worn out. If it's one of the other bearings, I'm just gonna have to go ahead and make a trip down to the dealership and buy those. Worst case scenario, it's one of the bearings that's inside of the actual transmission, and then we will have to drop the transmission. Well, I guess worst case scenario would be opening it up and finding bits of gears everywhere, but I highly doubt that just because it runs and drives fine. So we have that, we have the oil for that, and since we're under there, we might as well change out the transmission mount, and the shifter on the Forester is extremely sloppy. Let me show you guys. See, this is not gonna work. See, even when I put it in first, it still goes everywhere. It's ridiculous. When you're driving, you're just trying to guess what gear you're in. So we went ahead and got some aftermarket shifter bushings, and I went ahead and paid extra to get the whatever you call this shifter joint, the OEM part from Subaru, because all of the aftermarket ones that I found, yes, they were cheaper, but a lot of people said that this weld right here broke after a certain amount of time driving, and the most common thing I heard was that this hole here was not in the right spot. So once they bolted everything back up and they got in the vehicle, first it would hang to the right. So first gear would be where third gear was, second would be where fourth gear was, and so on. So I definitely don't want to crawl under there and do this twice, so I just went ahead and spent the extra money. So hopefully this will fix that shifter. I also will be doing this in a span of a couple days. When I get off work throughout the week, I'll go ahead and work on it, so the video might look a little crazy. Alright, so it's already dark outside and we are in the garage, so I'll try to get as much light as I could under here. We're gonna begin removing parts in order to get to the transmission, starting with the exhaust. As you can see, the previous owner had some crazy contraption here holding the exhaust on, but I will say the exhaust is pretty sturdy. It's not moving anywhere. So this is the rear of the transmission that we need to get to, and I was gonna try to make life easier and just begin removing the exhaust from here. However, it's rusted pretty bad, and if you look at this rear nut, it doesn't even have a shape no more. And even worse, on the other side, the head of the bolt is actually sheared off. So change of plans, we're gonna try to remove it from the top of the downpipe, and hopefully those bolts are in better shape. The first thing we're gonna do is remove this heat shield. So I'm gonna go ahead and remove the intercooler to just give us a little bit more space. Now we're going to start removing the heat shield. Okay, so I couldn't get a good view of me removing the bolts, but now that it's off, I can actually show you where they are. It sits in there like this. So you have 1 bolt, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Just a heads up, I don't believe this has been tampered with since the car came from the factory. So 2 bolts actually did snap off. So later on, I guess I'll either buy new brackets for the heat shield, or I'll just go ahead and buy an aftermarket heat shield that'll only require 3 bolts. We're gonna go ahead and remove the bolts that hold on the downpipe. I went ahead and let them soak overnight with a WD-40, so hopefully we don't snap any of these bolts off. Okay, so luckily I was able to get all of the nuts and bolts off, and none of them actually broke off. So now we're gonna head under the car. We're under the car now, and we're gonna go ahead and start moving everything else from the exhaust. We're gonna start with this craziness. We're gonna go ahead and remove this bolt from the hanger. There we go. We start removing it from the rubber hangers. So once we take off all the hangers, you see the exhaust just hangs. I put this jack here for support. Now I'm gonna go ahead and lower it a bit. I'm gonna go under there and pull out the downpipe and the entire exhaust. Alright, so I finally got the whole exhaust out. Don't make the same mistake I did, and make sure you remove the O2 sensor clip. Next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and drain the transmission so we don't forget to do it later. Now we're going to go ahead and remove the drive shaft. We're going to start by removing these bolts here. Alright, I got them all off. The easy way to do this is to spin the shaft to where there's 2 exposed, pull your e-brake so it doesn't spin on you, take off those 2, release the e-brake, spin it around, and then put your e-brake again. Now we're going to go ahead and remove these. Okay, now I'm gonna go ahead and put the drain plug back in, get this out of the way and bring the jack up here so I can put some support on this so I can go ahead and take this off. Alright, we got the jack under there to support the transmission. Now I'm going to go ahead and take these bolts off. The transmission mount bolts and the other side. Alright, so next thing I'm going to do is take this bolt off to remove this part. Now that we got this out the way, we're gonna go ahead and remove the shifter bushing. If you can see, that thing is shot. We'll start by taking off this bolt, and once I have this bolt out, I'll go ahead and work on removing that pin. Now I'm going to take this and try to punch out that roll pin. Now I'm going to go ahead and remove the clip for the exhaust. I have to remove this bolt right here. Now we're going to go ahead and remove all the bolts on the housing. I'm gonna hit this with a rubber mallet and see if I can try to loosen it up. Alright, it's the next morning. By the time I finally got the cover off, it was probably like 1 in the morning. So I've seen other videos where they just hit the cover with the dead blow hammer maybe like 2-3 times and then pull the cover off. That is a complete lie. I think I must have took maybe 2 to 3 hours just trying to get this cover off. So there's a pin that goes here and there's another one up top which is still kind of there, you can see. So I was able to knock this one out, and pretty much everything was kind of like loose except this one was holding the other one in place. So I tried everything. I even, where this connects to the bracket on the cover, I put a ratchet strap to there and the other end to the rear diff, and that couldn't take it off. But I put tension on it, and eventually I kept hammering this away, and eventually this gave and I was able to remove the cap. I did have 2 bolts halfway screwed in just in case it did fly off. I didn't want everything coming out. Okay, so here it is. Here's the center diff, and actually I thought this bearing was going to be the issue, but it looks like it's perfectly fine. However, the rear seal, as you can see, started to fail. And if you look in here, there's pieces of it. So let me get this out the way. And there's quite a few of them. you see here, this bearing might actually be one of the issues. Doesn't spin, it's pretty loose. Same thing with the other roller bearing. It's better than the other one, but it's not that great. I know there's a little, has some play in it, so I might as well just replace both of those. Let me go ahead and take this out. The teeth does have some chunks missing out of it. Let's see if I can get the camera focus. Right there and there. This one looks fine. So here's all the carnage. Got the pieces from the center diff. Here's pieces of teeth. So hopefully none of this made its way into the transmission, but I don't know. When I drained the oil, it was actually pretty clean. I didn't have no debris in it, so I wasn't expecting this. Like I said, these are getting replaced. This one actually seems fine, but I have 5 Subaru dealerships that are local in my area, and not a single one had a single one of these 3 bearings in stock. So I went ahead and ordered all 3 just to get them all replaced. So my advice is, if you decide to do this, either buy all 4 bearings or just roll the dice like I did. So just make sure it's not your daily. Now we're gonna go ahead and remove these 2 roller bearings. Your setup might look a little different depending on what kind of puller you get. You can rent them from O'Reilly's or AutoZone for free. I just went ahead and bought this one from Harbor Freight, and I already got mine set up, so I'm gonna go ahead and remove that one. It comes off just that easy, so I'm gonna go ahead and remove that one. So for the second roller bearing, I had to cut off the cage that holds the bearings in place in order to make my bracket fit. So let's go ahead and take that one off. Alright, now before we try to remove the ball bearing, there is a snap ring that we're going to have to take off. Here's all 3 of them out. Honestly, this was probably the hardest one to get out. I don't know if it was just my setup in particular that made it difficult to get out, but yeah, this one's pretty hard to get out. This one was fairly simple. This one was fine. I just had to cut it open and remove the cage from it. So now I don't have a press. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and get brake cleaner and clean all the oil off both of these. Then I'm gonna go ahead and throw these in the freezer and probably leave them in there for a couple hours, and then I'll get the new bearings and I'm gonna throw them in the oven for 10 to 20 minutes before I go ahead and try to press them on. And in theory, this should shrink and the bearing should expand, so I should be able to press them on. So hopefully, if not, I'm gonna have to go to the shop and get them pressed on. So here are the new bearings. As you can see, they're completely different than the old ones. They're supposed to be better. From what I read online, they work just as fine, even though they're different size and completely different. So I got the oven preheated to 200. So I'm gonna go ahead and throw these in for maybe about 20 minutes. And I've had the drive shafts in the freezer for over a day. So as soon as these get up to temperature, I'm gonna go ahead and grab the drive shaft and this while it's still hot and try to press it on and see if it works. Alright, so I finally got them on. When I went to go put them on, they didn't really slip on like I thought they would. And I also kind of put them in at an angle so they didn't really seat down. So all I really did was just take the old bearing, set it on top, and lightly tapped it in with a hammer. It didn't really take much to get them to seat properly. So it's definitely doable. Now for the ball bearing, I'm actually leaving it in a little longer to see if it makes it easier to go in. Alright, so before we assemble the center diff housing, we're going to go ahead and fix the shifter bushing. So I'm going to start by taking this off. Next we're going to remove these two screws and these two screws. We remove these two 4 plastic screws, take this boot off. Alright, so now we just take off these 4 bolts. Right now that we got all 4 off, you're able to lift this up. And now we're going to go under the car. Alright, now we're just going to take these 2 bolts off and we're going to pull this whole thing out. Alright, so here it is out. So we're going to be replacing this, the shifter linkage that went in here, and this rear bushing mount. So this is going to go there, this here, and this is all the hardware to mount the rear bushing. And this is going to go here. So we're going to start by cutting this out. Move the rear bushing. Get the new one. Now we're going to place the shift linkage. See, this is the old one. And this is the new one. There it is with all 3 replaced. Now we're going to go back under the car and go ahead and throw it back in. So now we're going to go ahead and assemble this back together. Actually, now that that's on there, do not forget your shim. So we're gonna go ahead and grease it up a little bit. We're gonna put the shim right there like so. And that sits under the center diff. And now we're gonna get our shim. Don't forget. Put that one in there. Now this is the one that used to be in there. So now you take your one from your new bearing, lube it up. Lube it up. Goes in like so. There we go. And this is great. So now we're gonna go ahead and put the center diff back inside the transmission so we can go ahead and put this back on. Alright, so just like we did over there, we're gonna have to remove this part of the bearing because the new bearings are thicker. So we're gonna go ahead and take the new bearing cap and go ahead and put it on. Now we're gonna go ahead and take our new center diff with the new ball bearing and install it. Next thing we're gonna do is change out the transmission mount. Go ahead and flip this over. Alright, I'm gonna go ahead and throw this transmission mount back on, the exhaust and the drive shaft, and then we'll go ahead and fill up the transmission. So before we throw the intercooler back on, we're gonna go ahead and fill up the transmission because the fill hole and dipstick is all the way to the front, and when you have the intercooler on, it's real hard to get to. So we're gonna go ahead and take a long neck funnel and we're gonna fill it up to 3.7 quarts. Alright, so I got some good news and some bad news. So I've been driving the car for a while now. The good news is shifter slop is completely gone. The bad news is I put it together and at first I had a real loud metallic whining noise and that did go away. However, now I have a faint one that wasn't as loud as before. When I'm driving and let's say I'm going at 60 miles per hour, I'm going at an even speed, it's there, and when I press the clutch in, it does subside a lot, but then as I'm coming to a stop, I get a different type of metallic whine that kind of goes in line with me slowing down. I did try to get it on tape. However, it's really hard. There's like a bunch of noises going on in this car. For one, you know, I just changed the exhaust, so you can't hear nothing when I'm driving. I got, you know, my window gussets are worn out, so I got crazy wind noise. I got worn out suspension bushings from, you know, being 202,000 miles on this car. So I think it would confuse you, even if I was able to put it on tape. Even if I was able to get it on tape, it would just confuse you. But what I'm thinking is, yes, I replaced the center diff and those 4 bearings that are in the back. However, I believe the bearings that are like in the actual transmission are also worn out just as well as the other ones. And there's plenty of reasons why I don't want to take it out right now. So I've been driving it and it's perfectly fine. It's just annoying to listen to. I just put it back together. I don't feel like dropping the transmission at this very moment. Not to mention I just spent like over $100 in gear fluid that I don't want to go to waste. So I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try to fix other things that I already bought parts for, mechanically and cosmetically, and I'm slowly gonna end up buying, you know, all of the bearings that I can replace within the transmission. I'm probably gonna buy a new front diff, possibly a new clutch, new bearing, and maybe even, you know, the rear main seal, just so I don't have to go through taking this transmission down again unless, you know, I blow it up or something. So I'll keep you guys updated. If you guys really want a video of it, I mean, either send me a message or write a comment down and I'll go ahead and try to take a video for you to see, you know, if it matches up with what you're listening to in your car. But hopefully this video helps you out if you are planning to replace your center diff or any of those, you know, 4 bearings back there. I never did this before and it was annoying to do, but it was fairly simple. You're able to do it. But I'll see you guys on the next one when I continue working on this, and later on we'll go into, you know, tearing down the transmission and trying to fix that. So thanks for watching.